The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, and Other Stories from a Child Psychiatrist Notebook, by Bruce D. Perry, M.D., Ph.D. and Maya Solovich. Introduction. Imagine a 7-year-old girl, tiny and fragile, with meticulously neat braids. This is her first time in a psychiatrist's office. The doctor, a tall man with a gentle face, leads her to his room. For a moment, she just watches him, her dark eyes taking everything in. Then, without a word, she walks across the room, climbs into his lap, and snuggles in as if she's known him forever. The doctor is touched. What a sweet, trusting child. And then, she moves her small hand to his crotch and tries to open his zipper. In that single, shocking moment, the doctor's world shifts. He isn't just a psychiatrist anymore. He's a witness to a world he never knew existed. That little girl, Tina, wasn't being provocative. She was simply acting out the only script she had ever been taught about how to relate to men. Her world had been so twisted by trauma that this was her normal. What you're about to hear is not just a collection of stories. It's a journey into the deepest parts of the human brain, guided by one of the world's leading experts on childhood trauma, Dr. Bruce Perry. This book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, has become a foundational text for therapists, educators, and parents around the globe. It's a work that peels back the curtain on how our earliest experiences, both good and bad, physically shape the organ that makes us who we are. Dr. Perry is a neuroscientist and a child psychiatrist, a rare combination that allows him to connect the heartbreaking stories of children with the hard science of brain development. He has worked with the survivors of some of the most horrific events imaginable: the Branch Davidian siege in Waco, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the Columbine High School shooting. But it's the quiet, everyday tragedies, the children locked in closets, ignored in orphanages, or raised in the shadow of violence, that reveal the most profound truths. Today, I promise you one thing. By the end of our time together, you will look at human behavior, your own, and that of others, with a completely new lens of understanding and compassion. You will learn why trauma isn't just a memory that you can get over, but a biological imprint that can change the very architecture of the brain. And most importantly, you will discover the one thing that has the power to heal even the deepest wounds, a force so simple, yet so powerful, that we often overlook it. This isn't just a book summary. It's an exploration of what it means to be human, and how we can help each other become more humane. Book summary. Our journey begins where Dr. Bruce Perry's did, with that 7-year-old girl, Tina. When she arrived at his clinic, the school had labeled her aggressive and inappropriate. She was having trouble paying attention in class and didn't follow directions. The official file was thin, but the story it told was heavy. For 2 years, from the age of 4 to 6, Tina had been horrifically abused by her babysitter's teenage son. When Dr. Perry presented her case to his supervisor, the response was textbook psychiatry of the 1980s. She is inattentive, impulsive, defiant. She meets the criteria for attention deficit disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. The suggested treatment? Medication? But Dr. Perry felt something was deeply wrong with this picture. It was too simple, too neat. It ignored the elephant in the room: the trauma. He had another supervisor, a wise, older man named Dr. Dyroot, who asked a different kind of question. After hearing about Tina's symptoms, he simply smiled and asked, "Did you enjoy coloring with her?" He then gave Dr. Perry a piece of advice that would define his entire career. Spend some time getting to know her, not her symptoms. Find out about her life. This is the first great lesson of the book. Behavior is a language. A child's bad behavior is often just a desperate, scrambled message. Tina wasn't defiant. She was terrified. She wasn't inappropriate. Her template for human connection had been cruelly warped. Her brain was simply running a program that her experiences had written. Dr. Perry started to see a pattern. The children who came to him weren't bouncing back from trauma, as the popular belief went. They were being changed by it, right down to the cellular level. At the time, this was a revolutionary idea. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, was a new diagnosis, mostly associated with soldiers returning from war. The idea that a child's brain could be even more vulnerable than an adult's was almost unheard of. Dr. Perry's background as a neuroscientist gave him a unique perspective. He knew from lab studies that even minor stress in infancy could permanently alter the brain chemistry of young animals. He began to wonder, why would humans be any different? This leads us to one of the most important concepts in the entire book. The brain develops in a use-dependent way. Think of it like this. If you go to the gym and lift weights with your right arm every day, but never use your left, what happens? Your right arm becomes strong, muscular, and efficient. Your left arm remains weak. The brain works the same way. The neural pathways that are used frequently become stronger, faster, and more dominant. The pathways that aren't used wither away. Now, imagine a child growing up in an environment of constant fear. The neural pathways for the fear response, the fight, flight, or freeze system, are getting a constant workout. The brain becomes incredibly efficient at detecting threats. A teacher's slightly raised voice, a classmate's furrowed brow, a door slamming down the hall, these are all registered as danger signals. The child's brain is in a constant state of high alert. Meanwhile, the pathways for calm, trust, and thoughtful reflection are rarely used. They remain weak and underdeveloped. This isn't a psychological problem, it's a biological one. The child's brain has physically adapted to its environment. Dr. Perry realized that Tina's inattention in class wasn't a deficit of attention at all. It was a surplus of attention, just pointed at the wrong things. She was scanning her environment for threats, not for lessons on the blackboard. Her brain was primed for survival, not for learning. Her heart rate, even at rest, was a racing 112 beats per minute. The heart rate of a child on high alert. This constant state of alarm is called hyperarousal. It's like having the body's smoke detector set so sensitively that it goes off every time you make toast. But the brain has another way of coping with overwhelming threat, a response that is almost the opposite of hyperarousal. It's called dissociation. To understand this, we meet another child, Sandy. When she was just 3 years old, Sandy witnessed her mother's brutal murder. The attacker then cut Sandy's own throat and left her for dead. She lay alone with her mother's body for 11 hours before she was found. When Dr. Perry first met 4-year-old Sandy, she was living in foster care, a ward of the state. She had profound sleep problems, an extreme startle response, and strange, specific fears. She refused to use silverware, especially knives. She wouldn't drink milk. And when the doorbell rang, she would hide so effectively it could take 20 minutes to find her. She also had periods where she would just space out. Her eyes would stare into the distance, and it was nearly impossible to get her attention. This wasn't daydreaming. This was dissociation. Dissociation is the brain's emergency escape hatch. When a situation is so terrifying that fighting or fleeing is impossible, the brain does the only thing it can. It checks out. It floods the body with natural opioids, the brain's own version of morphine, which kill pain and create a sense of emotional distance. People in this state often report feeling like they're watching a movie of their own life. Time slows down. Nothing feels real. For Sandy, this was an adaptive survival mechanism. It protected her from the full horror of that night. But now, long after the threat was gone, her brain was still using it. A doorbell? A milk carton? A knife on the dinner table? These ordinary things were now cues that triggered her brain to pull the emergency lever. Her strange behaviors weren't random. They were echoes of the trauma, her brain replaying a distorted memory of that night. The doorbell had announced the killer's arrival. The silverware was a weapon. And the milk? After the attack, little Sandy had tried to drink some milk from the fridge, only to have it ooze from the gash in her throat. She had then tried to give some to her sleeping mother. Sandy's story teaches us that memory isn't just a mental movie we can replay. It's stored in our bodies, in our senses, in our automatic reactions. The brain creates associations. For Sandy, doorbell plus terror became a single fused neural network. Hearing the bell didn't just remind her of the event, it made her body relive the fear. Dr. Perry knew he couldn't just talk Sandy out of her fear. Her brain's lower, more primitive regions, the parts that control survival responses, were in charge. They react far faster than the thinking part of the brain, the cortex. You jump at a loud noise before you realize it was just a car backfiring. Sandy's brain was doing the same thing, but with milk and doorbells. So how do you heal a child like Sandy? The answer came from Sandy herself. In her therapy sessions, she would have Dr. Perry lie on the floor, face down, hogtied, just as her mother had been. She wouldn't let him speak or move. She would then reenact the 11 hours she spent alone in that apartment, trying to feed him plastic vegetables, covering him with a blanket, muttering phrases the killer had said, like "It's for your own good, dude." What was she doing? She was taking an experience of absolute powerlessness and turning it into one of absolute control. In this reenactment, she was in charge. Dr. Perry realized that regaining a sense of control is a critical step in healing from trauma. This is connected to the difference between stress and trauma. Stress isn't always bad. Predictable, moderate stress, like lifting weights at the gym, makes us stronger. The muscles tear a little, and then they rebuild, stronger than before. This process creates resilience. But trauma is different. Trauma is unpredictable, extreme, and uncontrollable stress. It doesn't strengthen the system, it overwhelms and damages it. Sandy's reenactments were her brain's intuitive attempt to turn trauma back into manageable stress. By repeating the experience in small, controlled doses, she was trying to build tolerance. She was trying to make the terrifyingly unpredictable become predictable, and eventually, boring. This reveals another profound lesson. Healing doesn't happen on a therapist's timeline. It happens on the child's. The therapist's job is to create a safe space and then follow the child's lead, allowing them to control the pace and intensity of their own recovery. After months of this reenactment, one day Sandy led Dr. Perry not to the floor, but to a rocking chair. She climbed into his lap with a book and said, "Read me a story." The healing had begun. But what happens when a child's entire world is one of deprivation? When the essential ingredients for healthy brain development are missing from the very beginning? This brings us to the story of Laura. At 4 years old, she weighed just 26 pounds. Doctors were baffled. They had run thousands of tests, blood work, hormone levels, biopsies, even exploratory surgery. They fed her a high-calorie diet through a tube in her nose, but she still wouldn't grow. One psychologist, fascinated by the case, theorized it was the first ever documented instance of infantile anorexia. But Dr. Perry, once again, looked beyond the symptoms to the life of the person. He started by talking to Laura's mother, Virginia, a young woman of 22. Within minutes, he discovered that Virginia had been a child of the foster care system. Abandoned at birth, she was moved to a new home every 6 months. At the time, this was done with the misguided idea that it would prevent children from becoming too attached to any single caregiver. We now know this is catastrophic. The bond between an infant and a primary caregiver isn't just a nice emotional experience, it's a biological necessity. When a baby is held, rocked, and spoken to, their brain is flooded with pleasurable neurochemicals. The caregiver's voice, touch, and smile become associated with the relief of distress, the satisfaction of hunger, the calming of fear. This process physically wires the brain for love. It builds the neural architecture that allows us to form healthy relationships for the rest of our lives. Virginia never got this. People weren't a source of consistent pleasure for her. They were a source of loss. As a result, she never developed what we might call a maternal instinct. She knew cognitively that she should feed and clothe her baby, Laura, but she didn't feel the deep, instinctual pull to hold her, rock her, or gaze into her eyes. She wasn't cruel. She was emotionally disconnected. She simply didn't get the same neurochemical reward from interacting with her baby that most mothers do. And for Laura, this lack of loving, physical touch was devastating. Her body responded to this emotional neglect by shutting down its growth hormones. She was suffering from a condition known as failure to thrive. Even with all the calories in the world, her body refused to grow. The message it was receiving was clear. You are not wanted. It is not safe to grow. This reveals a truth that is both beautiful and terrifying. Love is a biological nutrient. Without it, we can literally wither. We are born with a profound skin hunger. Dr. Perry knew he couldn't just teach Virginia how to be a mother. She needed to experience being mothered herself. He arranged for Virginia and Laura to move in with an extraordinary foster mother he knew. A woman he calls Mama P. Mama P was a large, warm, affectionate woman who understood intuitively what these children needed. She didn't interact with them based on their chronological age, but on their developmental age. She would rock 7-year-old boys like infants, because she knew they had missed that crucial, rhythmic soothing early in life. In Mama P's home, surrounded by constant, casual affection, Virginia began to heal. And as she healed, she learned how to offer that same healing touch to Laura. The results were astounding. On the exact same number of calories that had failed to sustain her in the hospital, Laura gained 10 pounds in 1 month. Her brain, finally receiving the signals of safety and love it needed, turned her growth systems back on. The brain's development is sequential. It builds from the bottom up, from the most primitive parts to the most complex. The very first systems to organize are in the brainstem, which controls basic regulatory functions like heart rate, breathing, and body temperature. These systems are profoundly shaped by rhythm, the rhythm of a mother's heartbeat, the rhythm of being rocked, the rhythmic patterns of day and night. Next comes the midbrain, which is involved in motor control, and then the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, which is crucial for attachment. Finally, the cortex, the thinking part of the brain, develops. If the foundation is shaky, everything built on top of it will be unstable. You can't teach a child complex social skills, a cortex function, if their emotional regulation system, a limbic function, is in chaos, because their core regulatory systems, a brainstem function, never had the chance to organize properly. This is the core of Dr. Perry's neurosequential model of therapeutics. You have to heal the brain in the order that it develops. For a child like Connor, a 14-year-old boy who was left alone by a neglectful nanny for the first 18 months of his life, this meant starting at the very bottom. Connor was socially awkward, had an uneven gait, and would rock and hum to self-soothe. He couldn't stand to be touched. Previous therapists had tried social skills groups, trying to teach him complex cortex-level skills. It was like trying to teach calculus to an infant. Dr. Perry's team started with massage therapy, to gently and repeatedly provide the skin-to-skin contact his brain had missed. Then, they moved to music and movement classes, using rhythmic activities like drumming and clapping to help organize his chaotic brainstem. Only after months of this foundational work did they begin to teach him the explicit rules of social interaction, how to make eye contact, how to shake hands, how to read body language. He had to learn consciously what most of us learn intuitively. Connor's story shows that even when the damage is done early, the brain's remarkable plasticity offers hope. With the right experiences, delivered in the right sequence, the brain can be reshaped. But what happens when this early neglect is so severe that it erodes the very capacity for empathy? What creates the coldest of hearts? This is the story of Leon, a 16-year-old who sadistically murdered 2 teenage girls and then raped their bodies. When Dr. Perry met him, Leon was chillingly devoid of remorse. He described the murders as if he were giving a school report. His only regret? Maybe throw away those boots? It was the blood on the boots that got me. On the surface, Leon's family looked normal. His parents were hard-working immigrants. His older brother, Frank, was a successful, respected family man. It was Frank who had turned Leon into the police. How could 2 brothers, raised in the same home, be so different? The answer, again, lies in the first few years of life. Frank was born when the family lived in a small, rural community, surrounded by a large, supportive network of grandparents, aunts, and cousins. His mother, Maria, who had some cognitive limitations, was never alone. There was always someone to help, someone to give her a break. Frank was bathed in love and attention from a whole community. But then the family had to move to a big city for work. They were isolated, living in a dangerous neighborhood. When Leon was born, Maria was overwhelmed. A fussy baby, Leon's cries drove her to desperation. So, she resumed the only routine that had given her comfort. She would take her older son, Frank, and go for long walks all day. leaving the infant Leon alone in his crib in a dark apartment. For hours on end, day after day. Leon learned early that his cries would bring no comfort. He learned that he could rely on no one but himself. The neural pathways that connect human interaction with pleasure never formed. For Leon, other people were not a source of love or comfort. They were simply objects to be used or obstacles to be overcome. He never developed empathy because his brain was never given the relational experiences needed to build it. He had a brilliant ability to read other people's intentions, but only to manipulate them. He had a theory of mind, but no feeling for it. His story is a terrifying illustration of the snowball effect in development. An early negative circumstance, a fussy temperament, and an overwhelmed mother, led to neglect. That neglect damaged his ability to form relationships, which led to behavior problems. Those problems led to him being grouped with other troubled kids, which reinforced his antisocial behavior. Each small choice, each negative experience, rolled into the next, gathering mass and speed until it became an unstoppable avalanche of violence. Leon's story forces us to confront a difficult question: what does it take to become humane? The book suggests that humanity is not our default state. It is something that is built, neuron by neuron, through thousands of moments of loving interaction. Finally, the book looks not just at individual children, but at entire communities. Through his work with the surviving children from the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Dr. Perry saw how a charismatic leader could use fear and unpredictable threat to control an entire group. He also saw how, after being freed, these children, who had been raised to see outsiders as Babylonian enemies, began to heal. What was the most therapeutic element? It wasn't the formal therapy sessions. It was the simple, consistent, predictable routines they established. It was the calm presence of the Texas Rangers who guarded them. And most of all, it was the relationships they had with each other. Ripped from their parents, their siblings and peers became their lifeline. They cared for each other, comforted each other, and created a small, healing community in the midst of chaos. This leads us to the book's most powerful and hopeful conclusion. The antidote to trauma is not a pill or a specific therapeutic technique. It's community. We meet Peter, a boy adopted from a Russian orphanage at age 3. For the first years of his life, he lived in a crib, with only 60 other infants for company. The adult caregivers were efficient machines, providing food and clean diapers, but no touch, no talk, no love. When he started first grade in America, he was a social outcast. He couldn't read cues, he acted like a toddler, and his strange behavior frightened the other children. His progress stalled. Dr. Perry, with the parents' permission, did something extraordinary. He went to Peter's first grade class and gave them a simple lesson on the brain. He explained, without judgment, how Peter's brain had missed out on some important experiences when he was a baby, which is why he sometimes acted differently. He didn't ask them to be Peter's friend. He simply explained the why behind the what, and in doing so, he transformed Peter from a scary unknown into someone who could be understood. The children, especially the leaders in the class, took it from there. They became Peter's protectors, his guides, his friends. They became his therapists. They provided thousands of small, repetitive, therapeutic interactions every single day. Peter began to thrive. The kindness of children, unlocked by a little bit of understanding, became the most powerful therapy of all. Commentary. As we come to the end of this journey through the boy who was raised as a dog, it's impossible not to be changed by it. The stories are heartbreaking, but the message that emerges is one of profound hope. What Dr. Bruce Perry gives us is more than just a window into the world of traumatized children. He gives us a blueprint for healing, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. The single most powerful lesson from this book is that relationships are the agents of change. The most powerful therapy is human love. We often think of healing as something that happens in a therapist's office, a formal, clinical process. But Dr. Perry shows us, again and again, that the most transformative moments happen in the messy, beautiful context of everyday life. It was Mama P rocking a child. It was a classroom of first graders deciding to include the strange new kid. It was a mother learning, finally, how to hold her daughter. This book challenges us to see that the brain is not a fixed, genetically determined machine. It is a dynamic, living organ that is constantly being shaped by experience. This is both a great responsibility and a great opportunity. It means that our small, everyday interactions matter profoundly. A moment of patience, a kind word, a gentle touch, these are not just nice gestures. They are neurobiological events. They are building brains. What can we take from this into our own lives? First, we can learn to look past behavior and listen for the message underneath. When someone, a child, a friend, even a difficult coworker, is acting out, we can ask ourselves, what need is not being met? What fear is driving this behavior? This shift from judgment to curiosity is the first step toward compassion, and compassion is the soil in which healing grows. Second, we can become more intentional about creating what Dr. Perry calls biologically respectful environments. In a world that is increasingly disconnected, filled with screens and structured activities, we need to fight for simple, human connection. We need to create rhythms and routines that feel safe and predictable. We need to prioritize unstructured play, shared meals, and face-to-face conversations. We need to build our own small communities, our own versions of the extended family, that can support us and our children. And finally, this book is a powerful reminder that trauma is not a life sentence. The brain's capacity for change, its plasticity, means that healing is always possible. The stories of Justin, the boy raised in a cage who learned to laugh and love, or Amber, the girl who retreated into a dark fantasy world but found her way back to the light, prove that the human spirit is incredibly resilient. But that resilience isn't born in isolation. It is forged in the context of safe, nurturing relationships. We don't just heal ourselves, we heal each other. That was a summary of The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Bruce Perry and Maya Solovich. We've touched upon some of the most powerful stories and ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary can only ever be a map. It can't replace the experience of walking the terrain yourself. The true power of this book is in the depth of the stories, in the quiet moments of reflection they inspire, and in the profound sense of connection you feel to these children and their journeys. This summary is your starting point, a guide to help you see if this path is one you want to walk. If any of the ideas we've discussed today have sparked something in you, I urge you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about absorbing information. It's an emotional and intellectual experience that will fundamentally change how you see the world and the people in it. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss out as we continue to explore more books that have the power to change our lives. Your support helps us grow this community, and together, we can keep learning and growing. Thank you for listening.